Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
What he experienced.
Good morning, good morning. My name is Andrea Simintov, and you are listening to Pull Up a Chair on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. A beautiful day outside of my window, a gorgeous, glorious Yerushalayim morning. A lot has happened since we've last spoken, since we've last chatted. Hi, let's share. And a tragic week, a shocking week, a week filled with hope, and a week filled with reflection. So before we go on to this special show today, I do want to say good morning. It's late at night to my friends in the States and in Canada. Happy to see you there. Boker Tov, Eretz Israel. Good afternoon, Australia. And we also have today listening in France, Switzerland, Sweden, Belgium's listening in this morning, and a hearty, warm, and indeed curious hello to our friends in the Islamic Republic of Iran listening in. Very nice. We're going to start today actually with an interview. I met a woman that, very interesting, nothing to do with the theme of the show, and the theme of the show is reserving judgment, but came across somebody, and I think that you will have a lot of fun meeting with her just as a nice diversion. I'm not going to tell you more, because it's what I call a surprise interview. And then later on, we're going to talk a little bit about what our response can be, could be, I'm not saying should be, but might be, to the tragedy this past week, Lag BaOmer in Meron. And we're going to talk a lot of Parsha today. And does the Parsha indeed relate? Well, you've listened long enough, you know. And also, we're going to throw around a few thoughts, and I'm also going to tell you a surprise secret about what I am going to be doing this Shabbos, if God helps me, because it certainly ain't coming from the husband. Anyway, what I'll be doing from Shabbos, where you can find me, and maybe I'd like to know your thoughts. Chat room is open. The IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com chat room, if you're listening through that medium, type in, tell me where you're listening in from. And again, any questions, any thoughts, any thumbs up, but most important, keep nice. Andrea Simintov, guess what? I'll see you on the other side.
How did a nice Jewish girl from Delaware end up living in Israel? Shalom, I'm Natalie Sapinski. Join me on my show, Returning Home. Meet different people who have moved to Israel. Hear their personal stories, their highs, their lows, and everything in between. Each week, we talk to experts on immigration and the process of moving to Israel. Listen to Returning Home every Thursday, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
Okay, we're back. Andrea, I'm sorry, I'm laughing, boys and girls. We had a little technical glitch during the break, and I was a little nervous. I thought I lost you forever, but I'm back. Okay, so anyway, so while we're waiting for our guest to come on the line, I'll give you a hint. Her name is Rebecca. Can you not have a holier name than that? But anyway, so I've mentioned on the show before that during the corona, the segers, the forced quarantines, the husband and I had a joint mutual craziness, and we bought online a used caravan. Well, anyway, we've been the owners of this caravan for several months now, and it's been sitting in a desert parking lot, and this is the Sabbath, this is the Shabbos. We are going out, please God, with our caravan and the dog. The caravan is about the size of a parking space, and all I can tell you is that my living room is piled with things that have to come into this caravan. I mean, we have to have the French press, we have to have the wine, we have to have all kinds of food items, we need blankets, we need pillows. I don't know that there's going to be any room for us. And I said to the husband, reserve a place, a magnificent place. I want to go into the forest, into the trees, which is why I must be going to the beach to bake in the sun. So I'll look like Tom Hanks on Castaway in a little while. Anyway, we'll talk more about Andrea on the beach, and we hope we make it back. But in the meantime, I want to introduce you to our guest. Her name is Rebecca Ehrenpreis. I met Rebecca a couple of years ago in a different format, in a women's networking event, and I took an immediate liking to her. I related to her because, like me, I felt that she was very much a Renaissance gal, going into different areas of life and trying to find out where she fit in. And suddenly, I learned that Rebecca, she'll tell us about her background, but she is a narrator of audiobooks. And I thought, do we ever actually give thought to the people whose voices we're hearing? And I'd like to hear more about it. Rebecca, are you on the line?
I am.
Are you awake, Rebecca? Are you awake?
Yes, I am awake.
Okay, so I just wanted to give our friends who are listening in. We've got fabulous audience today from all over the world. Later, I'll send you the list, and I think you'll go crazy. But anyway, when we spoke originally, it was the 20th anniversary. We're not going to spend too much time in this, on the vicious, violent murder of the lovely young boy, Kobe Mandel. And it was the 20th anniversary of the release of the book, I believe it was Lessons of a Broken Heart. Was that correct?
Right.
So we were going to talk a little bit about Sherry Mandel, the mom who wrote it, but we talk about that on the show at other times. But forgive me, Sherry was being interviewed all over the place, and we're going to get her on. But I became suddenly crazed to find out how in the world. Well, what do you do, Rebecca? Tell us what you do as a book narrator.
I'm an audiobook narrator. I started out doing voiceovers for a number of years. I'm a graduate of Stern College, Yeshiva University, and I made a niche for myself. I did a special major there. I have a Bachelor of Arts in Speech and Drama, and I was doing voiceovers. I worked at CBS News Radio in New York. And my first thing in voiceovers was I was at a CBS holiday party, and I took a friend, and the friend had a very deep baritone voice, and my boss, who was the news director at CBS, said to my friend, "Wow, you have such a great voice." And he said, "No, you have to listen to her. She has it." And then no one
Did you have any idea where
me.
this was coming from? It sounds like it was coming out of left field.
Yeah, no, I never told them because I was always I was very shy. I was a news assistant, and I was just I wanted to get my foot in the door. It was at News Radio 88 in New York.
I remember it well, yeah.
Yeah, it was, and so all of a sudden they had no idea, they just knew me as a production assistant. So I had a meeting with the news director, and then I got a meeting with the creative director, and they started, they said, "Who are you?" etc. And I had already been working with a teacher who was doing voiceovers, a lot of voiceovers. And
so wait, I'm jumping in here because we don't have tons of time. Okay. And I know that people are listening, they're going to want to know, first of all, how do you find the work, or does the work find you?
So in the beginning, I'm looking for work. The work doesn't find me. So there's a bunch of places that I audition for. And, it's a hit or miss, and there's a lot of misses.
So let me ask you, are they listed? I mean, where do you find these advertisements? I mean, it's not in the back of the Jerusalem Post, looking for a voiceover.
It's in the audio world. Like, we all help each other. They're like a bunch of groups on Facebook, and the people will post if there's an audition coming up, and then everybody auditions. That's how it is, and that's how I hear about them. So like, I audition. There's a lot of misses, but I've been working for 2 years, and I have already 12 books. One is a Holocaust book.
Okay.
I meet with very interesting people, like this person, he survived the war. Very interesting story he had in Holland. And
all right. Well, we'll get to that, but I'm very interested in you. So how many books? So you've been actually working...
12.
You've done 12 books.
I'm on my 12th now. This one is also interesting. I'm working with a psychologist whose book has been translated in 8 languages, and it's about how to deal with your teens. With their...
That's wild. So let me ask you a different question. Well, sort of related. Could you... If you didn't like the subject, do you have to like the subject matter in order to narrate, or can you separate yourself?
You have to separate yourself. But all these books that I got, I auditioned only for books that I would like. But for example, I'm taking courses, and a lot of there's some things that we have to read for the teacher, and it's not for me at all. It's all business and politics, and I don't.
Yeah.
So
can you sound fascinating when you're discussing that? So
what?
Let me ask you a different, because, okay, so obviously, you just hit on it. You say business, politics, it's really not your thing. But I suppose if they're giving you a hefty paycheck, you could make yourself sound fascinating. But
no.
Genre? Say that again, Rebecca, what was that?
This is just with the courses. You audition for what you like. That's what most people do. I mean, I wouldn't audition for anything political or anything business-oriented because I'm not very interested in it. I'm interested more, for example, for nonfiction like memoirs, self-help, relationships. My favorite genre is horror.
I
unbelievable. I a lot for horror ones.
That is hysterical, because I thought, I was trying to get you away from, I think in our earlier discussions offline, I said like, I like to keep this show upbeat. And I said, let's not, of course, we're going to touch, memoirs and hefty things and Holocaust. And I didn't want to be bleak about it, but you just blew me out of the water. Horror. All right. So I'm assuming that
I have an audio, there's a trade magazine for all the audiobooks, and it's called AudioFile Magazine.
AudioFile Magazine. Can anybody subscribe to it online?
It's online, or you can get a print edition, and it takes like indie authors and also the bestsellers. The New York Times best-selling list is also on it, and every month they review a number of narrators, and I was reviewed in February for a horror book I did, and it was a wonderful review.
I don't even know where you go with that. So let me ask you this now, because this has been fascinating. I just thought when we spoke, I said, women who are doing interesting things that you wouldn't think about, we take it for granted. Rebecca, if someone's written a book, someone has a fascinating memoir, somebody needs to have the best narration possible, how can they reach you? Is there an email address?
Yes, so my email address is Ehrenpreis, so it's REHREN, P as in Peter, REIS as in Sam, 75 @gmail.com.
Okay, that's fantastic. What I will do is, Blina, I will put it in the show notes when we write up the show. Anybody who wants to get in touch with you. This has been fascinating. Thank you for waking up at, as we say here, the crap of dawn to discuss your
I woke
holy
up
work.
at 5.
You wake up at 5. Okay, and I hope that we can call upon you again when we need some additional insights.
Okay, thank you very much.
Not at all, Rebecca. Thank you. Shabbat shalom, and thank you for making me smile this morning.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye-bye. That was Rebecca Ehrenpreis, voiceover artist. I just thought that was a little bit of a detour from the kind of things we do, but fascinating Jewish woman doing fascinating Jewish work, and I never heard that horror thing coming. My name is Andrea Simantov, and when we come back, more on Meron, bullying, and Parsha.
Shalom, everybody. Making a difference often takes just one moment and one person at a time. I am Orly Benny Davis, your show host on Israel News Talk Radios from Jerusalem with Love. You'll be hearing people talking about politics, religion, social issues, and making a better tomorrow. Join me, Orly Benny Davis, for God and Country. From Jerusalem with Love.
Wednesdays on Israel News Talk Radio.
Okay, we're back. Andrea Simito. The clock is really flipping today. That was great. All right, so we are back, and some thoughts about Meron. Okay, Meron is where 45 holy Jewish men were trampled. One not knowing what was going on in front of him, and the inability of this terrible surging crowd to stop. I'm going to be emphatic and say it was not a stampede. It was indeed a shocking, crushing fall. And I heard, once people were not so vulgar as to the next day start issuing their diktats about what had happened and who was responsible and where were the rabbi and the politicians were to blame and it's all about Bibi and somebody should investigate the police force and on and on and on. Which is why I say anyone who knows and loves God's Torah knows that there are very strict laws about slander, speaking ill of others, the preciousness of silence in difficult times, especially when our respective souls are being trampled upon. So what then would I talk about this week if not to mention Meron? Well, what is Andrea's opinion? Is she pro the pilgrimage, against such gatherings? What, pray tell, is her final word? There are many others who are learned and have merited the platforms which to speak about uncomfortable issues such as this. What will I say when I have been wrong in the past about people and incidents, mostly to my shame and the glory of others? I'm human. Yes, finally, the admission. And in the past, I have prejudged and later hoped that I would not be judged for my cruel eye and ability to snap into judgment. The Torah has a lot to say about how we conduct ourselves, especially as a people who claim to walk in God's footsteps. We've been created in his image, his actual image of benevolence, as well as in his image of ourselves in all that we could be. Came across some lovely notes today from, he's got a long name. All right, I read him every week. Rabbi Dr. Tzvi Hirsch Weinreb. If you ever get, drop me a note Andrea at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, and I can send you the notes to his, I don't know if he has a website, but his writings. He's so approachable. He's so available. He's like everybody's favorite uncle or Zadie. I really do love his stuff. And he talks about bullying. Now, bullying, you remember those of us who watched Little Rascals, there was like that little kid Butch and he went around, rrr, rrr, rrr. But bullying can be very insidious. Bullying with our attitudes, bullying with our airs, bullying with haughtiness, making others around us feel small. It's been around since the beginning of history, according to Rabbi Weinreb, referring to a behavior that actually victimizes others, that abuses other people. Not just physically, verbally. We talk about verbal. The word abuse has been bandied around so much that it's almost become anemic. But imagine using words to commit violence against another person. Words do inflict pain. How many of us grew up with the saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never harm me? It's not true. It's a lie. Words inflict pain upon others and cause long-lasting damage. Teachers, rabbis, and occasionally Andrea, right, are asked, what does Judaism have to say about this? And the answer is simple. Whether we're talking about the behavior of others, attitudes of others, Judaism has a lot to say about bullying. And a lot has to do with this Torah portion. It says right at the opening of the portion, do not wrong one another. Rashi quotes the Talmud, which states emphatically that this refers to verbal abuse, accosting others with words. Rashi says one should not tease or taunt another person, and one should not give inappropriate advice to others. The first is very overt, not teasing, not taunting, but the latter is more subtle, misleading a person, giving him advice which doesn't fit his personal situation or his personality, is in the eyes of our sages a form of bullying. One must not say to somebody going on a pilgrimage that he wants to connect and say, why did you go? What are you getting out of that? Didn't you think? One must say to a Baal Tshuva, a repentant sinner, in the formal terms, remember your former deeds? Remember how you used to party a lot? Remember when you went with this one and that one and did this and that? The person who speaks to a penitent this way is guilty of the sin of cynicism. He is facing a spiritually motivated individual who sincerely wants to change, but by confronting him with past deeds, past actions, past attitudes, we discourage another person and we trample on someone's idealism. We have no right. Again, my friends, Meron, a person who wakes up one day wanting to be different, our children, our spouses, how about silence? How about this? Saying to a sick person that his illness must be a punishment for his misdeeds. Anyone who addresses a sick person in this manner is guilty of both, you ready? Pretentiousness, sanctimony. Who are we? How do we dare to presume that we know the workings of heaven, of God's system of reward and punishment, and in addition, arrogantly proclaim in our message, you know what? I can declare it because I'm holier than you. How aware was Chazal, our sages, to the fact that the likeliest targets of bullying are precisely the people who are closest to us. Sensitivity to others must begin with sensitivity to spouses, to family members, which is why I actually step away from my notes. And when we say, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, treat another person as you would yourself want to be treated is to look at someone else as though they are an extension of our skin. So it doesn't just have to be our spouse. It doesn't just have to be our partner. It could be the stranger who is created from the same glorious fabric as we are. You know, it's even shocking to point out that when barren Rachel, she bemoans her fate to her husband Yaakov, her barrenness, her infertility. Yaakov becomes angry with her and says, "Am I in place of God who has denied you the fruit of the womb?" The rabbis of the Midrash, they share God's reaction to Yaakov's retort to her. Is this how someone responds to someone in distress? The Midrash teaches us that even the patriarch Yaakov was once guilty of a callousness that bordered on emotional abuse. He was held accountable. This is the lesson, I believe. I've seen the shows. I've seen the writing. I've seen the commentaries. Now that the dust has settled and the bodies have been collected and the funerals have been held and the shivas have been announced, I've read the genius articles of what woulda, coulda, shoulda been done. There's a lesson here that we all, in my opinion, might take to heart when we read about such flagrant, oh my gosh, flagrant bullying. We're all capable of it. We're all capable of casting judgment. We're all capable of pointing fingers. And unless we guard against it, we might actually engage in it more often than we realize. That call to judgment. This, my friends, is the impetus of my silence on Meron. I'm personally frightened of what my natural call to blaming and finger pointing might lead. I will say it here. I don't know God's design. Integrity, commitment, and the willingness to be wrong, or even better, not knowing. This, in my opinion, reflects a better embodiment of living a Torah life. When the Torah tells us, as it does in this week's Parsha, that we are not to wrong another person by abusing him, casting judgment on him, verbally, physically, we mustn't think that this is addressed to some villain, some scoundrel. It's a lesson directed to each and every one of us. And that's a lesson we must absorb and, chas v'shalom, in times of hardship, make certain to employ.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
This is Shai Ben-Tekoa, and each week I'll be webcasting to you from Judea, origin of the word Jew, a people besieged and beleaguered in every generation. Nazi Germany's but a memory, but in its place the world invented the phantom Palestinians as this generation's internationally authorized Jew killers. Tune in for a different slant on life in Israel, Phantom Nation, every Monday.
Hi, I'm Rabbi David Aaron. The soul basics are the most profound, the most essential, and yet often the most neglected in our education. Join me for Soul Talk on Israel's News Talk Radio and discover the secrets to love, spiritual growth, and personal power.
Okay, we're back. Andrea Simintov, pull up a chair. Let me just take here. We're looking at all these notes. Wow, we prepared. I'm excited. I'm getting ready for the camping trip. Okay. So anyway, we are back, and a couple of things I do want to throw out. Usually we delve right into Torah, which we might, but what I did want to say is that a few more things that I think are imperative to be aware of, in case you're not living down the block in Israel or totally tuned in. You know, there is no one like Am Yisrael on Friday morning, the morning after the disaster. I must tell you, I didn't even know about it. I went to bed. I guess I went to bed we didn't do a bonfire. We just kind of went to bed. And early in the morning, I received a note. I heard my phone buzz, and it was my lovely nephew from America. And he just said, he said in Hebrew, Baruch Dayan Amet, blessed is the true judge, which is the way we say condolences. I was shocked. I started to shake. What am I looking at? Is someone one of my beloved family members? Well, it wasn't like that at all. He then told me about Meron. I hit the news. And at the same time, suddenly, I saw things about restaurants. There were restaurants up north, kosher restaurants, that had opened their doors and were giving free food, taking home prepared food, free food to the families of those who were injured and still missing at the time, who wouldn't have time to prepare for the Sabbath. They went and they just said, please come get food. Just take it. We love you. It's the least we can do. There were also lines. If you would have seen the videos of the lines of those waiting to give blood, can I tell you, there were Orthodox Jews, there were secular Jews, there were Zionists. It was incredible. They were tattooed and pierced because people just wanting to give. And in my next, I call it when I see it, there were leaders in Arab communities opened up spots up around the Meron area where people could stop, could rest, could eat. They prepared kosher food for them, and they could drink on their way back from the disaster in Meron. And that included Muslim villages where people were fasting for Ramadan. There were many Muslims, Christians, and I'm looking here, Druze, that also came and gave blood. My friends, why are we so terrific in our worst? When the going gets tough, we're staggering, just staggering. I wish it were different, but you know what? It's good to see us rise to the challenges whenever. Okay, here we go. This week's Parsha. Interesting. The Parsha is, telling you, I'm having some very interesting computer issues going on here. All right. So I was going to go into the whole, there were a lot of things. Well, one of the things I have to talk about coming this fall, we begin the Jubilee year, the year of Shemitah. Why is she talking about Shemitah? Because I came across it in preparing for today's Parsha, and I just thought it was really fascinating to talk about. Shemitah is the year in which we let the field lie fallow, okay? We let it rest. Now, it's different from all the other commandments because the other commandments teach us how to relate to God, how to relate to parents, to children, friends, how to relate to slaves, strangers, animals, even to ourselves. Notice we're talking about living beings. However, here, the law about the land is the mitzvah of how to relate to our very earth, which we could even perceive as inanimate or unfeeling. And yet, it still merits a series of laws that create a Shabbat in the land. And because of this uniqueness, there are those who incorrectly, and I'm going to say it again, I call it the orange on the Seder plate crowd. They incorrectly think to relate the mitzvah of Shemitah, the land laying fallow, to the original environmentalists and first socialists. It's those who bend the Torah to what they want it to be. And they suggested that the laws of Shemitah had less to do with this divine decree than with Moshe, or Moshe being the social reformer who wished to impose a natural order in the world. Don't go there. That's not what it's about. The Torah tells us emphatically that Shemitah is a Shabbat LaHashem, a mitzvah with an inherent kedusha, an inherent holiness, exactly like the other mitzvahs given by God at Sinai. And no one should confuse God's mitzvot with human attempts to control the economy or the environment. Shemitah is a unique mitzvah in itself, that it's a source of true faith, true emunah in Hashem. And in that respect, it is a yisod, a foundation for the entire Torah. Because when a person, an individual, realizes that in the 6th year, he has to be gathering enough to harvest, to suffice himself and his family, his faith in God's hashgacha, the divine providence, has to be strengthened, and he will be encouraged to keep Shabbat, to learn Torah, to observe the laws of ribit, that's interest, and gezela, about thievery, scrupulously. Yup. Shemitah emerges as a primary source of faith in God and shmirat ha-mitzvot, watching the mitzvot. I share this with you because when something fascinates me, I just assume that it's going to fascinate you because we're very, very close. So anyway, I thought about it. There were so many people as I was growing up saying, well, that's a minor mitzvah or that's a major mitzvah. And here's Shemitah telling us, no. It's all equally holy in our responsibilities. We do not have the chutzpah, have the temerity to, impose our value system on heaven. Indeed, it's supposed to be the other way around. Okay, so here's a nice thought. Rabbi Avraham Zelmans from Warsaw, I can't tell you the time of his life, but coming out in Wellsprings of Torah. Wonderful book, find it online, called Wellsprings of Torah. A musarist was asked whether one may take a loan of money when he knows that in a normal course of events he will not be able to repay the loan, but has faith that God will clear him of the debt. God will somehow make it okay. So Chazal, the sage, replies to him, you may, provided that you yourself would be willing to lend money to a person who lacks the means to repay. Because you are confident that his faith in God eventually will help and be rewarded. But if you are not willing to lend money to a person who only has faith as his collateral, you too must not borrow money under those circumstances. I like that a lot. All right. So this week's parsha is Bachar Bechot Otai. How much is a human being worth? The Torah we're reading this week, the value of a person is pledged to the temple in terms of a scale measured in money. Now, the Torah, obviously doesn't mean that we're to judge a human being's value, by how big a check he can write. The worth of a human being is inestimable. No two people are the same. Indeed, this is what we say. We say that every man is a world. In the ancient world, when slavery was very prevalent, and, even in our day, sorry to say, when it still exists, the value of a person rests on, his worth in the slave market. How much work can he do? How old are they? What are their talents? All of this contributes to a monetary value. I'm even thinking when I went and applied for a mortgage, I couldn't believe. I was like in my 60s and they gave me this ludicrous mortgage. I said, gee, that's me worth a lot. The the poor Hungarian refugee who came to America in 1938 or 39, but was an expert in nuclear energy as we were facing war and could build an atomic bomb. He had a lot more value to the government than, say, a refugee who would open up a dry goods store in Brooklyn. It's just interesting to think that these are important ideas in a time when the value of people is certainly brought home to us, especially during a time where we can't socialize. We can't deal with people as we do in normal times. This only serves to emphasize how valuable people are, how incredible human connection is, and what every person can contribute to society and to the welfare of others. I personally think that this has great bearing on our time and in our social situation. Let me just see, because we only have a minute left. Yeah. My friends, before a wise man enters a pit, he lowers a ladder to allow himself a way out. We've become hypersensitive in this last year, hypersensitive to the fleetingness of human life and human existence. As we go into Shabbos, let's remember, be kind, be gentle, and be the embodiment of His glory. Shabbat Shalom from Jerusalem.
Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. Just click the orange button at the top of the IsraelNewsTalkRadio.home page, log in as yourself or an anonymous guest, and join in on the fun. You'll meet other listeners from all over the world who listen to Israel News Talk Radio, and you can make new friends. Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. It's the closest you can get to being in the studio with us.
We love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.